right, here we go on a Thursday night. Welcome in, everybody, to our first Thursday episode in the month of March. This is the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by our friends at Rebich Investments. Got a heck of a show for you tonight. Hopefully, it's been a good week. Hopefully, you've had a chance to get some rest ahead of high school basketball playoffs coming up tomorrow, because tomorrow we start states. So many District 10 teams and local teams trying to make their way through the state tournament. We're going to break it all down, explain which teams we think could go the furthest in the state tournament, and then see if there's any shot that we could have an all-Western final with D10 teams like we did last year with Girard and with Franklin. Tom Koval will join the show in just a second. We'll also talk some college ball as well. Gannon and Edinburgh women's basketball are one win away each from facing off for a third time this season. And if they face off again, it would be for the PSAC Women's Basketball Championship. We'll also talk to the Gannon men's basketball team as well, who blew out IUP last night and are one of the Final Four on the men's side. So a lot of college hoops to get to as well. So wherever you may be watching, however you may be with us, thanks so much for taking some time. My name is Isaac Petcash. This is the Gem City Sports Podcast Network, brought to you as always, of course, by Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info on Rebich Investments, head to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can simply call 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. Now, we start off this show by reminiscing to last week's show, and I say this because every so often we make predictions on the show, and we're going to make a couple of predictions tonight. And sometimes, more so most of the time, we occasionally look like fools with our predictions, and that's okay. That's normal. We're predicting games that can be upsets and can be the other way. You never know what's going to happen. But ever so often, we make a prediction that seems shocking, but in turn ends up being a reality. So even though he's not on the show tonight, we figured we'd pay homage to our man, Nick Artman, and maybe back up the truck a little bit on the man that we're going to bring in just a second. So here's how last week's episode went.
So I'm going to follow my gut on this one, and I'm going Harbor Creek.
TK, what say you?
Well, I don't know what he ate, but his gut's telling him wrong.
So clearly, Nick's gut wasn't wrong. In fact, he was eating all the sweet treats last Thursday evening. And Tom Koval, for the first time in quite a long time, a little off his rocker there, TK. Good to see you tonight. I figured we'd bring you in on a little bit of a exciting note for those who are in the podcast room tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Nick's not here, so I thought we could just skip that altogether. But thanks for bringing that. You know, what a great game that was. We say all the time it's hard to beat a team 3 times, and that one went down to the wire. Some cold shooting a little bit for Fairview, which we can attribute to great defense to Harbor Creek as well. And there you go. But they're both advancing to PIAA, so now the real fun starts.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, talking about if either of those two or both those two teams could make the Western Final. And again, that would be an all-District 10 Western Final, and we're going to just see what brackets we think could materialize with that as well a little bit later in the show. But the first thing we want to say out of the way, TK, is we said last episode, going into the weekend with the girls' basketball doubleheader in the District 10 Championship game and the boys' D10 Championship games, that we thought it was going to be an awesome weekend of basketball, specifically the Saturday with the 3A and the 4A Championship. And you're right, it didn't disappoint. And I think it goes to show that, maybe there was more than just one team in each of those classifications that are going to be a great opportunity to win at least a state playoff game, in my view.
Yeah, looking at some of the matchups, I can see a lot of possibilities. I certainly don't want to make any predictions, but I think there's some good chances for a lot of the D10 teams. We got some good teams in there with some playoff experience, with some good coaches. So I'm hoping there's a lot of success.
Well, let's start with this, because there are a lot of District 10 teams. We're not going to focus on all of them, of course. We look at the Erie County, some Crawford County teams with Meadville there in the mix in 5A. That doesn't seem like they've played in weeks on end, but that's just how it goes. I digress. And tonight we're starting off by trying to identify one team on the boys and one team on the girls' side each, between TK and I, that we think have the greatest possibility of getting to the state championship game. Again, all these teams have opportunities. We're just trying to figure out a path for one. And maybe this question can be rephrased, Tom, as which team are you most confident in or has had the best playoff run so far that may be able to carry it over going into the state tournament? Let's start on the boys' side. The boys' side has been a little bit crazy with the 4A bracket. Of course, you had upsets in the first round, and it ended up being Cathedral Prep, the 1 seed who made their way through and won the tournament. Same with 3A, with Iroquois getting to the championship game. And then, of course, Erie First Christian running their way through 1A, McDowell getting there in 6A. So we're kind of spoiled for choice. Is there a team that you look at on the boys' side and you say, yeah, they're primed to make a run?
Well, it's really hard not to say that Cathedral Prep has a really good chance to make a run, right? They were playing very well at the end of the season. They ran through the District 10 bracket, putting up big numbers offensively. And, with the exception of the first round matchup, right, the Knock team that they get matched up with, which is the 5th seed out of the Whippeal, they suffered a little upset at the beginning of that tournament, so they got a lower seed. They're a very good team. So, but I think if Cathedral Prep can get through that, that second round game should be one that they could definitely, not have any problems winning. Maybe advancing into the quarterfinals and drawing a North Catholic team possibly that was finished second in there. I think they could have a nice little run in there. It sets up well for them with their placement in the bracket.
I think one thing that we saw from Prep in the District 10 tournament, this is going to seem obvious by the box score, their offense just hit another level. And we knew they had the guys, right? Nanda Morarki, who can shoot from 3, Michael Thompson, Max Wallace, who can work it inside. They got a couple of nice guys off the bench and they can score. But I thought with Prep, their offense just seemed more fluid in the postseason. And I think what Jeremy Lynch really did well with this team is understanding that they didn't have to be a catch and shoot team. They didn't have to be a team that could, run the floor with great pace. They could score with just making, 2-3 quick touch passes, but it didn't have to be overly aggressive and overly fast. And I think they've really found their offensive game, Tom. And not that you're going to need to score in the 90s to be able to win state playoff games, but when you play these Pittsburgh teams, you're going to have to score the basketball. I just think their offense has been much better in the postseason, even than what we saw in the regular season, really dating back to that first game against McDowell.
Yeah, no doubt. They're much more comfortable in the way they're playing, which all good teams do, right? You want to be playing better at the end of the season as you roll into the playoffs. You want to have momentum. They certainly have that. But to your point about their offense, right, they have a lot of different pieces. They have players that can penetrate and make moves going to the rim. Spencer Kane coming off the bench that can knock down threes all the time, inside, outside. With Wallace and Michael Thompson. So they got a lot of different pieces. So if something's not going well because it's just a high school kid, they're having an off night, they have the luxury of being pretty deep offensively that they can go to other places.
Looking at Prep's path, as you mentioned, Knock, which that's the greatness of the Whippeal tournament and really the District 10 tournament 2 and 4A is that you have more than just 2 or 3 teams that get to make it. So Knock becomes the 5, and now Prep arguably has a tougher matchup, you could argue, than even Grove City or potentially Sharon or Hickory, who finished below them in the District 10 standings. Then you look down the rest of the path, and I agree with you, Tom. I think the quarterfinal, if they can get past this first-round game, is a really good possibility. And I would even say the semifinal, too. When you look at the teams that they could be playing, North Catholic has had a nice run in the Whippeal 19-6. I haven't gotten a chance to watch much film on them, but I think Prep matches up well because of their bigs and because of their depth off the bench. The thing that would intrigue me the most is, Jeremy Lynch has been able to get to this spot. The biggest issue that I think he has ran into is just that lack of depth. And to me, this year, he has more of it. You just mentioned Spencer Can off the bench. There are others as well who can play. And I wonder just your thoughts on what it's going to take for Prep to be able to make a run. Because we've seen them be able to get to this spot in the past, and they have been able to get to state championship games. I just wonder what it will take for this year's team, Tom, to be able to get there.
Well, first and foremost is luck, right? You got to get very lucky because you got a bunch of high school kids playing their hearts out to try to win these games, and there's so much emotion involved that sometimes things don't go the way that they want it to. You need a call here or there, a loose ball here or there, somebody not getting in foul trouble or somebody getting in foul trouble on the other team. There can always be an injury. There's so many things that can happen when you get into a bracket tournament where it's one and done, right? It's not the best of 3 or the best of 5. So you got to have a lot of luck going with you, right? I think the second thing is to be rolling into the tournament with some momentum, which they have, right? You get that confidence going, and you're not worried about a slow start because you've been playing so well already. So they have that going for them already. If they can get a little bit of luck, right, and things go the right way, the ball bounces the right way, they can make a run.
So you're on Prep. I would agree with you that I think they probably have the best chance because they have the deepest roster to be able to make a run. But I would identify two other teams as well. I think McDowell is poised based on how they've been able to play in the last two games and the win against Alderdice. And really, I don't want to say it was a cakewalk. I'm not sure Kevin O'Connor would call it that, but they really came out and dominated State College, who had their number, of course, last year in the state playoffs. This McDowell team, keep an eye out. They get Central Catholic in the first round, which is not going to be a piece of cake. I mean, they're the three out of the Whippeal, but they're a lot better than I think it would show. But if McDowell, it's like Prep. If they get past their first round matchup, I think they're looking at a great opportunity at the quarterfinals. And I'm seeing Upper St. Clair as the team that's probably going to end up getting there at 23-2. I think the Trojans, if they play with the same pace that they played in the sub-regional postseason, their trap game for me was really convincing that Kevin O'Connor was able to employ. And it got to a point in the game specifically against Alderdice, which I called, they didn't even allow the Dragons to get to the bucket. It's not that they were getting into the paint and then making good defensive plays to force them to miss shots, Tom. They just made it difficult for teams to get to the upper third of the floor to begin with. I think McDowell's got a good shot to make a run. I think if they play with that defense, they have a really good shot. And again, Camden Kramer has put up 51 points in the last two games. He also has now Blaze Myers, who's playing at his most confidence. And, the two have some blood relation. And I think those two alone can give McDowell a chance to at least get to the quarters. What they do against a potential Upper St. Clair opponent after that, I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about McDowell a couple times throughout the season. One of the big things in their favor is they got a lot of seniors, right? And when you're talking about playoffs and one and done, I know over the years of coaching, there's always just been a different intensity with seniors than your underclassmen have, right? Because the underclassmen, like, always in the back of their mind, like, we got next year, right? The year after, whatever it may be. Seniors, right? They know if they lose, they're done, right? So, and McDowell's got a nice group of seniors. I think they lead the defense for them, right? They lead the chemistry of that team. So they're kind of leading the underclassmen with them, and that's going to pay off dividends, you would think, to have a lot of seniors playing in this playoff season.
Other two teams that I think are intriguing to look at, Erie First Christian in 1A, which to me is the wild card of this. If Avery Collins plays as he has all season long, being at the pinnacle of District 10 in scoring, this guy I think can carry Erie First to a couple of wins to get Aquinas in the first round. I think it's a favorable matchup for them. This Erie First team can score the basketball. That, to me, is going to be the big question as can Avery Collins carry the team? And they have some other pieces, too, of course. I'll be interested to watch Erie First. And then for me, too, the other one is Meadville, just in the fact that they haven't really gotten to play much, save for the DuBois game in the last couple of weeks. But, I think they get a tough draw with Uniontown, who went 22-4, ended up losing early in the Whippeal tournament. They dropped to the 5 seed. But, I'll tell you what, Tom, this season I have seen Meadville have a few glimpses that I look and I say, are they the best team in District 10? I just think their shooting prowess, when you have Burchard and Lutheran, and we've talked about the two of them, Tyke Butler, a good third option, they have multiple attackers that can put daggers in the throats of teams. And I think for them to lose, all of them have to have an off night. So, I don't know how they're going to come out because, again, they haven't played a lot of basketball recently. But, man, that to me is the one team, even maybe more than Prep. If their shooters are shooting well, I don't know if they can be beat, save for a team that plays incredible defense.
Well, for all the years that I've been coaching, when I coach against a team and the shooters shoot well, it's really hard to beat them. Right. Sometimes no matter what you do game plan wise, when kids just come out and make shots, there's nothing you can do to stop them sometimes.
But I even mean like 35-40%. If all three of those guys are shooting at that mark, it'll be tough.
Yes. I mean, they have the recipe for that. Like, they got several shooters, and if they're making shots, it's going to be great. And you can look at this time off. As a coach, I don't like it. You want to roll right into it. You can say that maybe that extra time will keep them fresh and that now they don't have injuries. it is what it is. What you see in that first game, if they come out and they're hitting shots, Meadville's going to be a really tough team to beat.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, the 5A bracket is so intriguing because they haven't played in a long time, but also because the Whippeal is pretty deep there in 5A. So Meadville's got a big game coming up this weekend. Again, all the games are scrolling along the bottom of your screen that will happen this weekend. Bunch on Friday, bunch on Saturday, so you can take all those in. Other playoff games that we haven't talked about on the boys' side happening as well, and you can see those on the bottom of your screen. Let's talk girls, Tom. I think the answer would have been really obvious really up until last week, that Northwestern is clearly the team in District 10 on the girls' side who would be the team that could make the furthest run. Now I look at Harbor Creek in the Fairview game and think, okay, is it maybe one of them? Who is it still Northwestern for you, or is there another team in District 10 that you have seen in the postseason that you think has a chance to make the biggest run?
I mean, I looked at the 4A bracket a lot. You know, and you hate to be fearful of teams, but you see the second round matchups for both Fairview and Harbor Creek running into North Catholic and Oakland Catholic, right? Yeah. Those are difficult matchups. You know, I certainly don't want to turn this show into a Catholic versus private school, but I mean, I know those schools. I know Oakland Catholic is drawn in from a lot of different players, right? Mm-hmm. So to match up against a Fairview, which is a community school, that can be tough, right? But Fairview's got some good players. I can see them beating anybody. But if you're looking for roadblocks in a bracket, right, they have to go through Oakland Catholic, who was 23-3 in the Whippeal, right? And then Harbor Creek, you know, even though they're supposed to get the better draw, right, they're running North Catholic in the second round. So those are two really tough games in the second round if they get there, right? You can't walk through anybody in that first round of the playoffs. But it is nice to be playing at home. But those are tough matchups going to the second round. So, yes, to answer your question, I got to go with Northwestern on that end in MPP, running them through that bracket in 3A.
I was going to make a point on the 4A bracket, and you beat me to it, and with understandable reason. I don't follow the Whippeal, of course, as much as others do. And I say that, you know, understanding this next point, understanding that. I'm not sure I've seen a Whippeal state bracket this deep in girls basketball in quite some time. I mean, you could make a legitimate argument that all 6 of the Whippeal teams will either advance or potentially be, you know, 4 of them at least in the quarterfinals. You know, you look, okay, Oakland Catholic obviously winning the Whippeal, their prowess. They've had, of course, matchups against Cathedral Prep in the past that have been barn burners. But then you go down the ring and you say, okay, North Catholic has ended a lot of District 10 team seasons in the first round before. South Park, there is a 6 seed. They're no slouch. Elizabeth Forward has had some, you know, big wins that have dethroned District 10 teams in the past. I don't know, Tom, if I've ever seen a Whippeal bracket on the girls' side that is this stacked.
Yeah, I mean, you hear those school names, and they have historic programs for sure. You know, so just looking at it on paper, it can be scary. You look at the records. But, you know, I always keep in the back of my mind what I thought is coaching in District 10 is we have a level of toughness and a level of defense that the Pittsburgh teams don't play as much, in my opinion, sometimes. I think, you know, everybody says we play defense. Everybody says we're good at offense. But when it comes down to it, I just think that that's more of our niche up here is we're a defense team. And if you look at Harbor Creek and Fairview, I mean, they're holding teams in the 30s. So I think that's what they got to ride on to those playoffs. And if you can hold, no matter who you're playing, whether they're in District 7 from the Whippy or not, if they can play good defense, it just comes down to a couple shots at the end of the game and you can make a win.
Let's talk the Wildcats, Tom. I agree with you in the 3A bracket. I think they get a pretty favorable draw. Not that playing Whippeal teams is a favorable draw, but I think what we saw from Northwestern, at least in the district playoffs, is 2 things to me. Number one, their defense is a lot better than what people give them credit for, and I think they've shown that all year, and it was exacerbated even more in the playoffs when they really clamped down in the second half, both against Mercyhurst Prep and against Seneca to be able to win the District 10 championship. I would also say that we went back and forth on this program, and I'm sure Steve Sawit has also gone back and forth in his mind. How much do you give of leash? Do you give Michaela Presser-Palmer to be your saving grace? And what I mean by that, and you know this as a coach, is how do you tote the line between letting her be the one for the whole game and also trying to incorporate your team. And what we've seen now is that they can win both ways. They can win by giving MPP the ball for the entire game, like was the case against Mercyhurst Prep and Seneca. They can win at a team game. How realistic do you think it is that this Northwestern team could potentially look at running the table? I mean, I think they've got the pieces there. I just want to get your thoughts based on what you've seen from this team now coming in undefeated and looking at the 3A bracket. They are, to my knowledge, the only undefeated team in the 3A bracket, for what it's worth.
Yeah, to make a run in the playoffs, you have to have a special team and a special player. And they have that, right? They have a special player. I think you take the leash off and you keep it at Northwestern, and she goes without that as this playoff run goes. And you really have to trust her decision making. When you're as good as she is, as a coach, you don't want her to force things, right? But at the same time, you don't want her to pass up shots. Like a lot of times, it might be better for her to take a kind of difficult shot as opposed to a player that doesn't have as good a shooting percentage as her, taking an easier shot. But you don't want to take a really tough shot and give up a great shot. So it really falls down to decision making, and that happens in the flow of the game. Things have been really good for the way Steve has been doing it and MPP throughout the close games they have had this year. So I think they're doing things right now, and we'll just see how they roll. I know Shadyside Academy historically is pretty strong, and they run into them the second round. I can see a lot of coaches really trying to do not necessarily some junk defenses, but probably trying to face guard. As we run into the playoffs here, we might have some teams that have some better athletes that can stay with Michaela a little bit to guard. So it'll be interesting to see those matchups as they progress.
I do think, though, to your point, with District 10 having that defensive toughness, and that's obvious, that's been highlighted for years, is that Michaela Presser-Palmer, though maybe she hasn't been face guarded by superior athletes, and that's with respect to the teams that they've played. They had to go through Fairview early in the season, for example. I do think what we saw in the District 10 playoffs is that it really doesn't matter how many people you put on Michaela. And so unless you are quite literally spying her the entire way down the floor, i.e. you're putting two players on her no matter whether she has the ball or not, she's going to get her points. And so to me, I think for Northwestern, the magic number every game, I would put at 45 or 50. You get to that, I think that there's a good chance that they can beat teams like Shadyside. If they get past the first two rounds, then you're looking at either Trinity or River Valley, who's 25-1 in the District 6 and was the second seed. I think realistically they can beat any team. And so, if you put the number at Michaela Presser-Palmer at 30 a game, or even 25 is the number that I've given her as the starting benchmark. Can you get 20? Can you get 25 points from the rest of your players? That, to me, is the really big question for Northwestern, because they have had games where they've done that, but they haven't had to do it recently with it being playoffs. So I really like Northwestern's path. I think that they've got a really good chance starting at home tomorrow night to be able to make a run. And again, like you said, a special team, Tom. And I think for, Michaela Presser-Palmer, she's still got one more year left, but you wonder, is she going to have the same team around her again? And so I think that, for her, she's clearly going to lead. The question I have is, can the rest of her team get 20 or 25 as a unit? And I think they can.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about being undefeated. Boy, I'd really like to have lost a game beforehand, so we're not worried about that anymore. You can argue both sides of it. To not have a loss, that kind of puts that expectation on you that you're going out and you're just thinking about winning. So you have that mindset. You've always visualized winning. So I think that's a positive as well. They're just going to draw back on their season, and they've been successful. They have had some close games where they've had to really fight. I can remember the one Seneca game that they were down and they came back to win. So those types of things they'll be able to draw back on. The team has been so successful throughout the regular season. Let's just hope they keep it going, because it'd be nice to see them make it a few rounds at least.
And for those in Albion, it will be fun to have a home playoff game to start. That building Friday night is going to be rocking. I know that they've been waiting a while to have a really great opportunity to get to see this team A, host a state playoff game, and then B, potentially make a run. So that building is going to be rocking on Friday night. If you don't have any plans, I highly suggest you go to Albion or any of these District 10 teams that are hosting games on Friday night and into Saturday. So there's your look at the girls' side, Tom. Before we switch into college, I wanted to do this exercise, and we touched on it a bit in the 4A girls bracket and even the 4A boys bracket because there are so many District 10 teams. What's the likelihood that we would get a potential District 10 Western final? We saw, of course, last year what an atmosphere between Girard and Franklin. It's always difficult to make it through all of the WPIAL teams and some of the other teams from, say, District 6, for example. Your thoughts on if we could see it again, Tom, the likelihood that we would get another District 10 All-Western final?
Boy, it's tough to say, right? You want to root for your home teams. I can say this. I don't think 5A is going to have it, right? Only one team represent.
Yeah, literally can't happen.
Right? I mean, we've talked about the roadblocks in the other brackets. In the luck that you need, boy, I hope we get one. But as I looked over the brackets, and you brought that up as one of the talking points, if I was to make a prediction, I don't think we're going to see one. There's just too many things involved. But I hope we get a lot of at least one teams representing us in the finals.
That would be great. And we saw last year Cathedral Prep girls, Franklin boys getting to the state final amongst the local teams. Hopefully we see a couple of them again this year. I do think we have a really plausible path to get there, but as we know, state playoffs are where games become less of a degree of separation and more so of a how do you make shots down the stretch and how do you make the little plays work. So we'll see. Those are the games Friday and Saturday across the bottom of your screen. Get out to a couple of them. It's going to be an exciting atmosphere for the teams that are playing at home, and for the teams going on the road, they need your support too. So make sure to support them. We're supported as always by Repetition Investments. They do a great job of helping us out with our show, supporting our show, and we're grateful for it. And they do a great job of keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info, head over to the website, www.repetitioninvestments.com, or simply give their number a call during business hours at 814-734-3433. Again, 814-734-3433. All right, let's talk college, TK, with the rest of the time we have on this podcast, because as we've been going through high school, college has progressed as well. And I wanted to start with getting your thoughts on where we stand on the women's side. Gannon and Edinburgh women are both now in the Final Four of the PSAC. They do not play each other, but are in the Final Four coming up on Saturday. If both teams win, we get a third matchup between the Fighting Scots and the Golden Knights, which I know for me would be mouth-watering because I'd get a chance. Well, I may not get a chance. I'm going to be in West Virginia with the Gannon men's team. But let's start with this. You know, there's been a lot of talk about the Atlantic region rankings and which team is going to host the regional, and that's all going to be sorted out by Sunday. But let's start by talking about these two teams with Gannon and Edinburgh. And I think for the Fighting Scots, this has been a season that's been one marked by Morgan Gentile, marked by Haley Sims and their ability to score. What exactly have the Fighting Scots in your eye been able to do this season that maybe in other years they fell somewhat short in? Callie Wheeler's done a great job with Edinburgh, and I'm just curious to get your thoughts as to what's made this team gel this season from your perspective.
I mean, Callie Wheeler doing a great job is probably the biggest understatement that you could make, right? It's always supporting her, but looking at this season, they lost probably their biggest piece of offense that transferred to I believe, the University of Buffalo.
Yeah.
From last year. So that was such a huge loss. And they lost their point guard. Mara went down maybe early on in the season. So one point guard transfers away, your other one, I can't imagine what that's like as a coach. And somehow, you know, Callie's done her best work to bring this team together. You got Gentile, who's a great player coming from, you know, St. Bonaventure, not a point guard. She's not a point guard, but she's getting it done. She's doing what she has to do, right? You'd love to see her off the ball and slashing and scoring. The way that Callie's brought them together as a team, the intensity they play with is so fun to watch. I mean, boy, they're 14-2 at home. So for them to get the PSAC at home, home court advantage, that's just huge for them as they roll in. I'm real excited to see how they finish this off, because they've been doing nothing but greatness throughout the season.
Yeah, and you know, for Edinburgh, I think really what was marked, you know, impressive for a lot of people on Wednesday was their ability to hold off IUP. That was a heck of a run the Crimson Hawks made in the fourth quarter. Edinburgh led the most of the game by double digits, and even when they didn't play their best basketball, they still held on and found ways to win down the stretch. You know, the couple of games that I've watched when, you know, they hosted Gannon and when they came to Gannon is they do a really good job of spreading out the floor. I think that's been one of the things that's been an underrated part of their game, is that they make it really difficult for you to be able to guard them man to man. because they're so even to an extent zone too, because if you go zone, they just know how to get to areas of the floor, and they move the basketball with such efficiency that it's really difficult to guard. So I think that that's been something that Callie Wheeler's done a really good job on. And now the question is going to be is, now that you're at home and, the expectation, I'm sure, at Edinboro is that you take care of business, is how do you fare in those games? The rest of the Final Four is no joke. And so I think for the Fighting Scots, it's going to be a matter of, can they continue to spread the floor like they have done all season long? And that will be really critical as well for the Fighting Scots. But again, to your point, Tom, get a chance to play at home in these Final Four. And as we're going to talk about throughout this quick conversation, I would make the argument that, and again, I don't know anything, even working at Gannon. I think whoever wins this PSAC tournament, whether it's Edinboro or Gannon, is probably going to get a great chance to host the regional. So it's for a lot more than just the PSAC championship, you would like to think.
Yeah, that's the icing on the cake, right? To get through there and to be able to host. There's nothing better for your players to be comfortable and not having to travel and playing on your home floor. That's a huge advantage. So there's a lot at stake here, but I know Callie and Coach Ryder are looking at one game at a time, right? You just got to get to the next one, survive and advance. But yeah, there's some stakes here for the outcome of this tournament.
And when you look at Gannon, it's the same way. I think the Golden Knights, in a really impressive victory over Seton Hill last night, 60-52. Kate Ratliff continues to shine. She had a double-double in that game. Bree Claxton hit a couple of big shots. And then the local product, Carissa Dunham, a Cathedral Prep graduate, who made a huge three-pointer late in that game to really seal it and put the nail in the coffin of Seton Hill, who they've now beaten 3 times. It's so interesting, by the way, because you split the Western Division into 4 teams. It's been Edinboro, Seton Hill, Gannon, and IUP all season long. All 4 of these teams have swept one or the other, and they've all been swept by one or the other. And for Gannon, the team that they've been swept by has been Edinboro, and so they're looking at that down the horizon. Cleve Wright, of course, is Kutztown to face coming up on Saturday. Tom, you've obviously spent some time taking a look at the Golden Knights and just some of the things that they've been able to do. From your view and from your vantage point, this is a team that had some struggle late in the season at home. I feel like defensively they've been able to turn it around. What has allowed Cleve Wright's team to get back on track in these last few weeks from your eyes?
Coach Wright does a great job with leadership. And he's got a lot of leaders on that team. You can start to see it now at the end of the season. And there's nothing more important on the defensive end to have leaders, so you have the communication and whatnot to with your switches and matchups and knowing your scouting report. And Coach Wright does a great job with that. He takes girls in for whether he gets them as freshmen or not, and he builds leaders, having them read books, and he just builds leadership skills from them, which is a really impressive thing that he does. And you see that coming out at the end of the season, right? These girls are ready to go now because they did have some tough. They had some injuries, they had some sickness in some of their games throughout the season, but it looks like they're full go now, and they're very dangerous with that.
Yeah, and I think, too, we want to touch on the local products. I think the 2 Cathedral Prep graduates in Tori Mays and Carissa Dunham are playing really big roles as well. I think Coach Wright's been really impressed with his younger class. Jordan Popick, a freshman, comes in this season. She's been in the starting lineup for the majority of the year and a big defender for the Golden Knights. I think the other thing, too, that Gannon has done really, really well in the last few games, and what we saw last night against Seton Hill specifically, is they're very patient. And that's always been the case with Coach Wright's team, but even more to an extent in this past game last night. I think one of the keys that Gannon was able to hit home in the game was when Seton Hill gets a bucket, get the ball in quickly, but don't feel like you have to rush. Seton Hill is like the Gannon men's basketball team in the way that they like to press the floor, like to try to force turnovers early on. I think Gannon did a really good job of getting the ball in quick, not allowing Seton Hill to get set, but then they slow down. They take their time. They look for the best shot. And that's why, to me, the Gannon-Edinboro matchup is so intriguing because it's a little bit of different contrasting styles. Edinboro is good with 1, 2, 3 quick passes. and they're going to go right to the bucket, and they're going to attack you, whether it's with Jen Tyler, Boggs, or Haley Sims pulling up from three, where Gannon has that, as Cleve Wright has done so well, that methodical approach that makes it really difficult for you to be able to keep with them because they just keep the basketball. They don't let you have the basketball. So it'll be very intriguing coming up this weekend. It's Edinboro and Lockhaven, it's Gannon and Kutztown, and if the Golden Knights and Fighting Scots win, they meet in the PSAC title game. But I think really, Tom, it's great to see both of these teams doing so well. We've seen it coming for a long time now with the rivalry that's been budding, and it would be great to see a third matchup again on Sunday. And I think if we do, it will probably be the closest one we've had yet.
Well, yeah, let's be selfish, right? That's exactly what we want. That community basketball going. I'd love to see them battle a third time. I graduated from Gannon too many years ago. I got a good, close relationship with Callie Wheeler. I coach her daughter as well, so I'd love to see them battle again. That would be a lot of fun, and everybody wants a close game. Makes it exciting. Everybody loves that except for the coaches. The coaches are probably the only ones that want the blowout.
It is funny in getting a chance to, talk to Cleve Wright and just the respect that he and Callie Wheeler have for each other. But again, it is that fierce rivalry on the floor, and we would love to get to see it on Sunday. Me preferably, I would prefer to have that game be a 5 or a 7 o'clock game so I could potentially watch it on the ride home if Gannon men's basketball is able to make the PSAC championship game. But I digress. Let's finish with the Gannon men. They are the one team that remains locally in the PSAC tournament. Edinboro was knocked out by Seton Hill in the first round earlier this week on Monday. And so now you look at the Golden Knights, and they traveled to an area that they didn't necessarily expect. The top two seeds in the East get eliminated with Westchester and East Stroudsburg. And now it's the Golden Knights in Millersville in a game at Shepherd University in West Virginia coming up on Saturday afternoon. So, Tom, I mean, I've gotten a chance to watch every single Gannon men's basketball home game in 2025 and get most Gannon men's basketball games in general. And I look at this team, and it still amazes me, and Easton Bizzoli said this last night, that they have been a cohesive unit throughout the year, yet it's still a team that he has to remind himself still has not played a lot of games with each other. And so the big question that I will have coming into this game on Saturday with the Golden Knights is, they already have their spot in all likelihood secured in the Atlantic Regional. The big question is going to be what seed they are. Right now, they're second. We'll see if they move up one or they move down. It just depends. But I'm just so interested to see how this team will do moving forward with their heightened defensive abilities after their win last night against IUP. Because to me, if they can force turnovers, they got a shot to beat anybody.
Yeah, with that style of play, they want to turn the ball over and get as many touches as they can, right? And, I mean, impressive win against IUP, and they didn't even shoot it well from three. I think they shot probably in the 20% when I remember the stats, but, they shot around 50% overall because they get a lot of transition buckets with that defense. So it's tough as the season progresses. Some of these teams have seen this a lot. Maybe they get more used to it, but at the same time, to your point, this young team that has some transfers and whatnot, they're at the end of the season now, so they got almost a full season under their belt. So they're kind of taking it to that next level with their chemistry, and you're hoping to see that finishing out in the PSAC here for sure.
By the way, I want to give a shout out to Easton Bizzoli, who had himself a busy Wednesday. He won the game last night, but 4:30 in the morning, his wife giving birth to their second child early on Wednesday morning. So congrats to Easton. I know it's been a busy day for him, but surely a worthwhile day on Wednesday. And now he's traveling to Shepherd for the tournament. And now we get set for a crazy busy weekend. Tom, before we go, is there a game, and this could be college, this can be high school, whatever. I know we touched on a few. Give me a game that you think has the potential to be the highlight of the weekend. We mentioned Knock Cathedral Prep. We know that's going to be a big one. It could begin at Edinboro Women on Sunday. What is the one game that if you're a District 10 fan and you're looking to go to one that you think could be the biggest one of the weekend?
Yeah, I think Knock's very talented. I think that's the toughest draw that the prep boys could have gotten. I think that might be a really exciting game. Advantage prep because it's at home, but this is a very good Knock team. I think it could be a barn burner.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I think there are a couple of others that I would look at as well. The one that I'm most intrigued about on the girls' side is going to be Baldwin and Cathedral Prep. Not because I don't think Cathedral Prep is going to win the game. I just want to see how Doug Chusey's team is in the first round of the state playoffs. They are a team that hits another level when they get to states. I think, but you could make the argument that even by Coach Chusey standards, this hasn't been the greatest year for Cathedral Prep, and yet they still find themselves in a position to be able to make a deep run. So that will be very interesting as well. I think you have to look on the boys' side. Can Mercyhurst Prep go to Jeanette and win on Saturday? A couple of the road teams that we didn't even talk about, right? Mercyhurst Prep boys. The potential for Seneca girls, too, I think is a huge one. That's going to be a game that we didn't even touch on, Tom. With Seneca going to OLSH, I think that could be another highlight game as well, because we didn't even talk about the Bobcats. This is a team that's not really far off from the talent of Northwestern. They have a chance to make a run if they can win Friday.
Yeah, they can guard, man. They can guard. That's going to keep them in games. And going down to Olsh, I don't know anything about their team other than their Whippeal, third seed. But defense keeps you in games. And the way Coach Carter has them playing, Steve does a great job. I can see that being a close game as well.
I would say, look, again, I'm not one to, again, I make predictions, and most of those predictions go down the tubes. But, we talk about the potential for Western Final or at least District 10 matchups in the state playoffs. I will say this. I don't think that 4A is likely to happen, but if there would be a sleeper bracket that could see two District 10 teams matching up, I think there's a really good opportunity for Northwestern and Seneca to be able to get there. And again, both of those teams are going to have to go through really tough opponents. If Seneca's going to get there, they'd have to go through the 1-seed Greensburg Central Catholic. But this Bobcat team has not gotten blown out much in games this season. They play really, really fundamentally sound defense. And I have to believe that even though Steve Carter's bunch couldn't beat Northwestern in the regular season, you make the argument that outside of Fairview, they gave Northwestern the toughest test, and they were up and they were in games. I think that's got to give them some semblance of excitement going into the state tournament. And again, are they going to get through all the Whippeal teams? I don't know. But I think if there is a team that can scratch and claw their way into the fourth quarter with a 1 or 2 possession game, it would be them.
Playoff games, you talk about press defenses and traps and all these different schemes. Playoff games are going to come down to the last 3 or 4 possessions with your half-court offense and your half-court defense. And these teams like Seneca, Northwestern, Fairview, Harbor Creek girls that play such good defense, if that game is close, you don't know what's going to happen in those last several possessions. So I agree with you. I can see those girls battling for Seneca and Northwestern and going to the 4A bracket as well, knowing historically through the season how hard Fairview defends, and we saw Harbor Creek do it as well. Those teams are going to give anybody fits. There's no offensive player that wants to be going up against that brick wall of the defense, right, the whole game. So it'll be very interesting to see how these matchups go.
Love this time of year, man. Absolutely love this time of year. Only advice that I would give to you, TK, because you know much more than I do, is just make sure you watch what you eat this weekend.
You ain't got to give a shout out to Justin Jennings at Edinboro. I saw he was the PSAC West year. What a great job he's doing down there also. So way to go, Justin.
And for Shanker Evron, Defensive Player of the Year as well, of course, coming over from Gannon, a local story. Really big props to Shanker for his job, too. And again, Edinboro basketball on the men's side's on the up and up as well. They should be noted. Tough loss at home, again, earlier this week, but they are on the right track. That is for sure. So we got a lot of basketball to talk about. We'll wrap it all up on Monday for TalkErie.com, X, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. It is our Gem City Sports Podcast on Monday morning. Then we'll join you back here on Thursday. We don't know what on earth is going to happen or what teams are going to be left. All we know is that the teams that are still alive are going to be that much closer to a state championship, so we can't wait to talk about that. For Tom Coble, I'm Isaac Petcash. Have yourself a wonderful weekend, everyone. Watch some basketball for us, because we're going to be everywhere, but we can't be everywhere, if you know what I mean.